to the third chapter, third installation in this series of discussions on health, healthcare, and holistic approaches to health and healing. Now, I've talked a lot now about how the conventional Western approach to medicine tends to disempower us as individuals. We've talked about how, dis-ease and dysfunction occurs as a result of environmental demands or stressors overcoming our systemic resources, our systemic ability to be response-able to the demands and stressors of the environment. We've offered up a map that encompasses all the aspects of who we are. In fact, encompasses two fundamental paradigms: an objective paradigm, a scientific approach to understanding the world and our healing processes, as well as a more subjective paradigm, a paradigm that supports and empowers fundamentally and intrinsically the self, okay? Talked a little bit about how to use maps, understanding the holistic model as an atlas that allows us to step into various aspects of the map, step back out, and re-engage in different areas that can be effective for us. Now, in terms of becoming empowered with regard to our healing process and utilizing this holistic healing model in a way that is actually effective and makes a difference in our day-to-day lives, we've talked a little bit about how to engage with the environments of healing. And I want to take a little bit of time in this third section to explore at a more nuanced level what I mean by engaging the environment of healing. Now we're going to focus on the body aspect of the holistic healing model to begin to explore how it is that the self, ourselves, can become empowered in terms of engaging with the environments of healing, coming into relationship, as it were, with our healing process. Okay, so we're going to use the body. When we come back to how it is that the self begins to engage with the healing process, okay, begins to become empowered in the healing process, the things that we do and choose with regard to interacting with the various aspects or environments of the body makes a difference, reverberates all the way through this web of life, expressing itself in each of us in our own bodies. Okay? And so, for instance, when we look at, when we talk about managing the environment of healing, we can drop down into the physiology and find the lessons for us. Okay? We can look at the cell, for instance. Now, the cell, we think about the cell is being driven or masterminded or controlled by the DNA in the nucleus of the cell. That's typically how we've tended to think about how a cell operates. As a micro-manufacturing plant doing some certain thing for the body, okay? Building hormones, such as insulin that helps us to break down sugar and process sugar in our bodies. The pancreatic cells are manufacturing plants that do this, okay? Create this substance called insulin, among other things. So we think about cells as manufacturing plants driven by the mastermind of DNA. But in fact, what we're finding out is that is in fact very much not the case. That the processes of the cell are the result of its interaction with the environment. Pancreatic cells would not manufacture insulin if there was never any sugar introduced into the bloodstream, into the bodily system. So it's the environment that the, for instance, pancreatic cell is in relationship with that begins to drive the physiological functions. And as we talked about in the previous chapter, this goes all the way up and all the way down, okay? So we can, as individuals in the macro world, okay, in this world around us, begin to manage environments that call forth responses from our body right down into the individual cells. Now, this isn't really all that much of a mystery, frankly, when we think about the body, is it not? How do we manage the environment of the body as cells, as empowered individuals? Now, it's not the only, but two immediate ways that we think about and that we already know. What? Diet and exercise. All right, and we'll get more and more into specifics about how we manage the environment of the body, the mind, and the spirit. Okay, but we create situations where the body has to respond to, has to negotiate, has to engage in a dance. Okay, so as we manage the environments of the body, we call forth a response in our bodies. Okay, the aspects of our holistic self always respond to the demands of the environment, and this piece we're going to leverage from physiology to psychology to spirituality. All right. And then, of course, we're going to begin to understand the bigger environment within which we operate within this context or from this context. So, we look at a cell, okay, and things play out on the cell, and the actual wisdom of the cell is contained at the cell wall. This we know now, okay? And so, in some ways, the genetic information is a set of programs that are available and that can be called forth depending on what's going on in the environment. Depending on what's going on at that cell wall, the interface between the internal and the external. Okay? And this happens once again all the way up and all the way down. So we see our body responding to the demands of the environment all over the place in terms of looking at physiology. We see it in how bones remodel in response to the demands of the environment. It's why when we go to the gym and we work out, our bones get stronger. It's why when we go to the gym and we work out, our muscle cells get stronger. Okay? So we know this, we do this. When we go to high altitude, athletes, in particular endurance athletes, go to high altitudes to train. Why? Because at that elevation, the blood itself increases. In other words, the number of blood cells increase to respond to the lack of oxygen. Yeah, respond to the lack of oxygen, increase the internal carrying ability of oxygen. When those athletes go down to sea level, they've got all that extra blood cell, all that extra oxygen, and hence all that extra energetic capacity for when they're competing. Okay? We do this and we know this. This happens in our physiology. It happens also in terms of, more fundamentally, our genetics. Okay? And in some ways, it's the nurture versus nature. Okay? Nature being our genetic code, so to speak. Nurture being the relationship that genetic code has with the environment. How we're raised, where we're raised, what kind of food and resources are available to us, okay? So it's the phenotype, our individual qualities, okay, that make us individuals and different from each other. That phenotype is the result of our dance with the environment as opposed to the genotype, that pre-programming that is our genetic code, okay? And what we're finding is that it's actually not the genotype, but it's the genotype in relationship with the environment. In other words, the environment calls forth our individual expression of life, our individual expression of body, mind, and spirit in each of us, okay? Quickly, the diversity of the human genome, in other words, the differences between all of the people on this planet, is only on the range of 0.1% to 0.4%. In other words, 99.6, between 99.6 and 99.9% of us, all of us, is exactly the same. And so, in terms of genetic code, there's only a very small distinction. Well, what accounts for the wide variety and range of individual, unique people that show up in the world. What accounts for that? Well, partly it's that genetic coding and difference, but as important, and possibly it's been suggested, more important, is it's our relationship to the variety of environments that we grow up in or evolve in terms of our individual selves, body, mind, spirit in the world. Okay? We also see this in the field of epigenetics. Okay? Essentially, it's saying how we respond to the environment has nothing to do with genetics. It has everything to do with our relationship with the environment around us. Okay? So information and functionality of our physiology is carried not in the genetic code, but in our relationship with the environment. Is called forth by the environment. As individuals concerned with our health and health care, we can leverage this. We do not have to be medical experts to be able to manage in a very potent way our own health and healing. Again, body, mind, and spirit. So here's the thing. Health interventions that are about managing the environments of health in ways that use the environment, that leverage the environment to call forth our innate viability and coherence and order and wholeness within the body. They cultivate health in a way that allow our systemic resources to be able to respond to the demands of the environment. This incredibly potent and incredibly accessible and tragically misunderstood and underutilized in terms of our understanding of health and healing in this Western culture, Western paradigm of thinking about health and healing and treating dysfunction in the world. And we find that all aspects of the holistic model, body, mind, spirit, utilizing environment within the fields or paradigms of health and healing, all aspects respond within systemic limits, respond positively to the demands of the environment placed upon them. All right? And they respond in a way that increase our coherence, order, strength, viability, responsibleness to the demands of the environment. They allow us to respond to the demands of the environment in ways that allow us to express ourselves most fully, most joyfully, with increased flexibility. Okay, so this whole idea of managing the environment of healing really springs out of the alternative approach and paradigm of health and healing, as opposed to the objective paradigm of looking at things, the objective paradigm which drives the biomedical, scientific empirical approach to health and healing, which is really about analysis, breaking things down, measuring, looking at the components, and analyzing. So this is an approach that micromanages health. All right? So alternative paradigm and traditions, really about managing the environments of healing, creating a relationship between the self and the environments of healing. It's very much like cultivating a garden, this idea of managing the environments of health. On the other hand, we have our conventional Western biomedical approach, micromanaging, taking things apart, putting things back in, very much akin to, say, fixing a car. All right? So very different approaches here that actually come out of or aligned with the two fundamental paradigms that we talk about and that are intrinsic to our holistic healing model. Okay, so micromanaging health. This is the objective, Western, scientific approach, and very powerful, no doubt. Okay? On the other hand, the alternative approach, managing the environments of health, being in relationship with the environments of health, creating a dialogue between the self and the variety of aspects of the holistic healing model, being in dialogue in such a way that we support the expression or the revelation of holistic health, okay? The expression of flexibility and responsiveness and resourcefulness with regards to and in relationship to the environment around us, okay? And the stressors and the demands that the environment make upon our system, okay? So, two different approaches. Both powerful, right? So on this hand, if we follow our metaphor, we've got, we've got fixing a car. But fixing a car, this whole paradigm is about, the potency and power of the Indy 500, yeah? Extraordinary. On this hand, we have the elegance and beauty and magnificence of, say, Findhorn, okay? This is an extraordinary healing garden in Scotland. So, these are the distinctions. Now, when we cultivate health, when we manage health, when we manage the garden of health, we're nurturing and tending and watering and allowing things to grow. Okay? We create the condition that calls forth a holistic healing response. And this is also about cultivating viable ecosystems in a very different way than micromanaging health can do. Okay? When we micromanage, using this garden metaphor, micromanaging gardens gives us industrial agriculture. Okay, industrial agriculture, we're micromanaging by inputting the variables that plants need to grow, potassium and nitrogen and phosphorus. These are the chemicals that are used to fertilize the ground and create the plants. But what we end up doing is we create this vulnerable monoculture, okay, that is susceptible to pests. We need to use pesticides. Wild gardens, holistic ecosystems have their own innate strength, okay? So on one hand, we have vulnerable monocultures, okay? This is the conventional approach to health and healing. This is the objective paradigm, vulnerable monocultures. On this end, we have the alternative approach, okay? And here we have viable ecosystems, okay? And ecosystems that nurture and cultivate and call forth a innate, strong, robust, flexible health in the system, okay? The ability to respond to the demands of the environment. Two very different approaches. So this is a fundamental understanding of a holistic, empowered approach to health and healing. We support and engage with the environments of healing to call forth a response. We manage and leverage the environments of healing, and there are many techniques and ways to be able to do this across the body, mind, spirit, utilizing the different environments within which we express ourselves, within which we live, both socially and geologically speaking, both socially and within also our ecosystems. It covers more territory than conventional biomedicine. Conventional biomedicine is part of the empowered holistic approach to healing. It is part of it. But where the conventional biomedicine tends to micromanage health, tends to fix and cure, and requires expert knowledge, and is focused in a somewhat limited aspect of the holistic system. Limited aspect, in other words, that is viewing through a objective paradigm, particularly the physiological processes of the body and the mind, primarily. A holistic approach has a much wider range and much greater span with within which to operate and begin to engage health. So when things aren't working in certain areas, so when things don't seem to be responding from that conventional biomedical approach, we can step back out and up into the holistic model, take a view and assess and step into areas where we can be effective in terms of managing environments of healing, body, mind, spirit. So all of this is a philosophy of healing. It is a way of understanding health and healing. There will come a time very quickly when we begin to need to do something, okay? But what we're doing here is trying to anchor a deep way of understanding, a philosophy, an approach to understanding health and healing that begins to address some of the fundamental dysfunction that we find in our Western biomedical system, okay, and approach to healing, okay? So the holistic model, holistic ways of understanding is a nuanced and sophisticated way of re-empowering and reclaiming the potency of each of us, ourselves, in order to manage, engage, and lead the healing process, okay? It is utterly and completely about empowerment. You can choose to heal, you can heal, okay? You can choose to heal, you can heal, always. And this map gives you the atlas, right? The way of choosing ways to engage with a variety of environments of healing that always give us access to healing health. Okay, so where to from here? Well, let's begin to look in the next section specifically at the environments of healing that we can use, the environments that we can use to call forth health in the body, the environments that we can use to call forth health with the mind, and the environments that we can use, and even the techniques that we can use to call forth health using the spirit aspect of